The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. I hope you're enjoying this beautiful, almost June weather. We were so excited here to finally get rain in Topeka after what seems like several weeks. But we are thrilled that you are taking time out of what I know is your busy days and schedules to learn about the work that we do at Kansas Housing Unlocking Home, to learn about the Community Services Block Grant Program and the great information and resources that we have available. I know that we have a number of community action agency partners that will be participating in this call, so we're welcoming of them, but we also want to make sure we reach out and welcome all of the nonprofit or community leaders or partners that are out there that are just interested in learning about this new resource, how to utilize it, how to partner with the great community action agencies that are out there. So those are what we're really hoping to get from this. You know, we want to increase your familiarity with the CSBG program resource. We want to increase your knowledge of KHRC and the other resources and programs and services that we offer. So we've got about an hour of webinar planned. It may not take quite that long because, again, we know you're busy. As far as just the agenda itself, I may just kind of give you a little overview of what to expect. I'm going to start off, my name is Ryan Benson, Executive Director of Kansas Housing, with just an overview of our programs and KHRC's history. I'm going to very quickly talk about the range of services that we have, as well as the new state housing development resources that we have. And then I'm going to reserve the vast majority of the time to what I know you want to hear about, and that's the community action programs. You're going to be hearing from our team about those great resources through the discretionary grant that we have, how to partner and collaborate with community action agencies. You're going to learn about sustainability, you know, what we look for when we're evaluating these applications, what's allowable under this federal program, and then how it works, of course, the request for proposal, the applications, the budget, you name it. That's all going to be included. A couple of housekeeping things. Everyone is on mute currently. This session will be recorded and hopefully available on our website here after the program in case you want to go back and check something. We are going to have people monitoring the question feature. So make sure you look over on your toolbar and see that you have both a chat and a question feature. We'd welcome your questions throughout the program. We'll be trying to respond to those, but then we will be reserving the last portion of the session to kind of have a live Q&A time as well. I see several people, different friends that we've worked with, a lot of new people as well that are soon to be partners of KHRC. So we're just thrilled that you're here with us today. But let's jump right in and go ahead and talk about Kansas Housing. KHRC is actually celebrating 20 years this year, which is hard for me to believe. We are a self-supporting nonprofit public corporation that it really administers a variety of both housing and community programs. Our mission is simple. We help Kansans access the safe, affordable housing they need with the dignity they deserve. As far as who we work with, well, it's you. You know, it's community partners, it's nonprofits, property managers, developers, owner agents, tenants. If you live, breathe, pay taxes, or do business in the state of Kansas, you are a stakeholder of Kansas Housing. As far as our programs themselves, they truly run the gamut. Everything from homeless services to community solutions. We've got housing development programs, homeownership, energy efficiency, which we know is a huge area of focus right now. Of course, compliance has always been an important part of the work that we do, and emergency response these last couple of years in response to the pandemic. So I'm going to briefly touch on each one of these areas, keeping this moving so that we can get to the meat of this presentation. So the program we're actually talking about today is the Community Services Block Grant, or CSBG program, which falls under our Community Solutions division. Community Solutions it really encompasses a variety of different programs. We have the Emergency Solutions Grant, or ESG program, which actually funds service providers around the state who help people experiencing homelessness or at risk of becoming homeless. Our slides actually have links to our website where you can learn about any one of these programs. So be sure to click on the Emergency Solutions Grant and find out who the service provider is in your community. Of course, the CSBG program that you're going to be hearing about shortly, so I won't spend any time on that. And then we also have tenant-based rental assistance, which can provide people that next step up so that they can get that security or utility deposit, so that they can get a couple of months rent assistance through a variety of statewide grantees that we have on our website. So be sure to check out our TBRA program as well. In addition to these vital programs, though, we also fund a variety of different housing development tools and programs around the state. The ones I'm touching on now are actually federally funded. We have the Housing Tax Credit Program that's funded through the Department of Treasury. That program, we're able to actually finance the development or rehab of beautiful properties around the state that are affordable for the tenants and a wonderful asset for the communities as we grow, as our employers expand. So we're thrilled to be the administrator of that program on behalf of you all. KHRC also gets a variety of different funds from HUD and from other programs that we're able to develop that quality, accessible, affordable housing through our housing development programs. But continuing on, we have a couple of other divisions at Kansas Housing as well. Within one of the housing development division, I didn't mean to jump forward too much, there is the moderate income housing program. This program actually has been in existence for going on 10 years now, and it recognizes that there's a big group of people that actually make too much to qualify for the federally funded affordable housing programs, but they simply don't make enough to meet the basic market needs to buy a home, to build, or to even rent, particularly in rural areas. The legislature recognized this and they passed this program that has grown exponentially. It provides funds through KHRC to cities and counties and rural communities. We also have a new Kansas Housing Investor Tax Credit Program that is coupled with this program that I'll touch on here shortly. So we have the MIH program, but I also had alluded to weatherization, which is another field that we think is so vital as we all are thinking about ways to help our environment, to help make our homes safer and more comfortable. For years now, KHRC has administered funds through some of the state's LEAP funding, but also we get funds from private utility companies and from the Department of Energy that we're able to actually go provide free energy upgrades in communities around the state. So if you click on this website, you can find out who the service providers are for income eligible Kansans. They can be tenants, they can be owners of the property. We're able to go in and do elaborate blower door tests and infrared cameras and actually approve different measures that can help people save money month after month after month on their utilities. It's a wonderful program. Learn more about it on our website. So that's weatherization. KHRC also offers homeownership programs. There's our first-time homebuyer program, which has been around for many years, where we're able to provide up to 20% of the purchase price of a home. Wonderful, essential tool, especially as interest rates keep going up and the costs of homes have gone up. So this program is one where income-eligible Kansans can benefit, and as long as they live in the property for 10 years, they don't have to repay any of that loan. We have a list of participating lenders on our website. Please make sure you check it out. Meanwhile, we've got a few other things I just wanted to touch on before I turn it over to our CSBG team. Compliance is something that's never real fun or sexy to talk about, but it is so important because what we're doing is we're making good long-term investments in your neighborhood. We make sure that the properties that we fund are built up to our standards, that meet the federal requirements, to serve those that are supposed to be served through the program. We go out and do nearly 800 inspections now around the state and in your neck of the woods to make sure that we're good neighbors both now and tomorrow. That's our compliance section, which is absolutely integral to the work that we do. Continuing on a bit, I don't want to miss that KHRC has been heavily involved these last couple of years in COVID response. We all know that the onslaught of evictions and of foreclosures and of struggle that people have had in response to the pandemic. But fortunately, through a variety of different resources that you see listed on our screen, well over $350 million worth, KHRC, working with many of you and your nonprofit organizations, have been able to roll out the Kansas Emergency Rental Assistance Program. That program is now closed, but we were so honored to be a part of that response, which was so essential to our state. We also have the Kansas Homeowner Assistance, or CAF program, which is closing out at this point. We're actually out of resources, but we're thrilled that we've been able to meet so many Kansans who have been struggling to just make their utility or mortgage or even taxes during this time of pandemic. That's what's been happening with the federal and then the pandemic response. But I don't want to miss that KHRC during this time period, the last couple of years, has actually worked with many of you in your communities to capture the first comprehensive housing study in nearly 30 years in our state. We had over 70 listening sessions. We had over 4,400 survey responses. We had great conversations and scrubbed the quantitative and qualitative data. And we were able to put together and release this comprehensive study in December 2021. It's on our website. There's the 30,000-foot executive summary. There's regional assessments on each area of the state. We've got an interactive policy map tool that you can click. You can find out what the housing needs, maybe the vacancies or the incomes or the different demographics of your community, and that can help you make planning decisions for your organization. So be sure to check that out. You can also find out about the goals and strategies that came from that housing study. But we didn't stop there. We didn't want this study to just be a study that sat on the shelf and collected dust. We took it to the State House with a number of different partners, from Farm Bureau to chambers of commerce to different partners at the state, federal, and local level. We had private industry, we had nonprofit partners, we had conversations about how housing could lead to economic development, to jobs, and to ameliorate, can't say the word today, but for lessening the different causes of poverty, which is huge to community action agencies around the state. Through your work and our collaboration, we were able to pass over $62 million for our small moderate income housing program. We're able to create several new tax credits, an affordable housing tax credit, which will almost double the amount of affordable housing that we generate each year through our office. We have a new Kansas Housing Investor Credit, and then we have the new Rural Home Loan Guarantee Program that I want to touch on. I think the next slide actually addresses it. We opened this program in January. You're going to be hearing Marilyn here shortly. Marilyn has been a wonderful advocate for this program and resource. Definitely encourage you to reach out to her about it. But essentially, this program recognizes that in so many rural communities that it may cost, say, $200,000 to build a home that immediately appraises for $150,000, which causes a gap. And if there's a gap, then a lender can't make a loan. And if a lender can't make a loan, then the house can't get built. KHRC now has a resource that can provide a guarantee to close that gap. We can work with participating lenders and with potential homeowners to guarantee the loan gets made, the house gets built. We have future comparables in rural communities around the state. We'd love for you to help us get word out of this new resource. Check out our website. We've got a great fact page out there, or again, reach out to Marilyn. She's got great information on that program. Last slide, I believe. It's just an invitation before I turn it over to our CSBG team that every year KHRC puts on a housing conference. This year will be August 22nd through the 24th in Overland Park. It has gotten bigger and bigger and better every year, and we'd love to have you be a part of it. You can learn about the CSBG program, you can meet our partners, you can find out about all the other great resources, partners, and programs that I've alluded to. That's the overview in a nutshell. So much happening, so many exciting times, but you're a key part of it, and we thank you for your time today. At this point, I am thrilled and honored to introduce both Marilyn Stanley, KHRC's CSBG Program Manager, and Moniz Crawford, our CSBG Program Specialist. They do great, wonderful, passionate work for our office and for the people that we serve. And I'm honored to be a part of and work with them. I know that they each will be taking different times, so just wanted to introduce them, and I'm going to turn it over to whichever one of them is taking it from here. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Ryan. We appreciate you going over the KHRC programs. I've been with Kansas Housing Resources Corporation a little over 2 years now, and truly amazing work that we do here across the state. And I have to thank you all that have joined us today for this webinar to learn not only about KHRC services, but overall what the Community Services Block Grant is, along with the community action agencies. So thank you for your time today. All right. First of all, I don't know how many of you are actually familiar with what CSBG is. So I know that I can see on the participation list here today that we do have some of our community action agencies joining, and certainly they are going to be people you may want to reach out to. Part of our biggest role here at the state at KHRC is to help with linkages, collaboration across the state with working with those 8 community action agencies. So big picture, what the CSBG, or Community Services Block Grant, is, we have these 3 goals, as you can see there on the screen. Keeping in mind it's all of people or families and communities that are within a low income. Later in the slide, you'll see 125% of federal poverty limit and below is the target audience for all of these grant dollars. Okay, next slide. These are the laws and guidance that regulate CSBG. Overall, CSBG funding is quite flexible compared to most federal funding sources. Pretty open-ended as long as it's serving families and communities of the lower income range. But we do have, of course, it's federal dollars, so we need to follow the CSBG Act, uniform guidance as it comes to anything with the financial parts of the program. And within Office of Community Services, who is our source at the state level for this information, they also provide information memoranda, and then where we can find a lot of our guidance. And then the state, here in Kansas, we do not actually have a CSBG specific state law, but we do have a policy and procedure guide, which is also on our webpage. So as it states there on the bottom, the state's primary responsibility is the administration of this grant. So it may help to understand how the law and funding and all of the entire process works. As you can see here, Congress, and then Office of Community Services, the state offices, that's our role, Ryan, Moniz, myself, that's what our role is, and then the CSBG eligible entities. Those are going to be the 8 community action agencies that we'll be talking about more shortly. Maybe hard to see on your screen, but we wanted to give you just a little bit more detail. It's much more involved than just money coming to us at the state and then money going down to the 8 agencies. It's highly involved. There's all of these steps and processes in each of our areas. And so certainly you could look at this in greater detail later. And obviously, if you have any questions about that, do let us know. We do have our state plan development coming up later this year. Certainly, if anyone's welcome, we have public hearings to receive feedback about our draft state plan, and we do that every 2 years for Community Services Block Grant. Okay. All right, next slide. All right, what is a community action agency? Some of you may hear of some agencies nationwide may call themselves community action. Others call themselves whatever their nonprofit name is. There are over 1,000 agencies nationwide. About 80% of them are nonprofit. Now, there are some that are within local governments, such as a public community action agency. So CAA, you'll hear an acronym throughout that this is our community action agencies, right? And they're also referred to as the eligible entities within that CSBG Act. So some might ask, eligible entity, what about us as a discretionary grantee? Well, you would be part of our discretionary funds, which we'll describe a little bit more soon. All right, so for Kansas, we'll go over the list. We do have one public community action agency that serves their county. All right, here's a little bit more on the eligible entities. Please note that it could be private nonprofit, which I already mentioned, public entities, limited purpose, migrant, seasonal farm worker, tribe, or tribal organizations. Here in Kansas, we only have the top 2 that are receiving funding. All right, hopefully you're familiar with some of these agencies. If not, they are very important to get to know, especially if you're thinking about applying to the Community Services Block Grant, discretionary funds. All right, see the color codes? All counties are served in one form or fashion by one of these 8 organizations. So you can see there a couple of the agencies serve one county. I want to point out Wichita Sedgwick County Community Action Partnership. They go by their acronym, the WSCAP, WSC CCAP. So they are actually the government public organization, and they serve Sedgwick County. Community Action in Topeka, they serve multiple counties. You can see there in the gray. Harvest America Corporation, you can see they've got that whole left side of the map. You can see that there. Economic Opportunity Foundation, they do serve Wyandotte County, only Wyandotte County. We've got NECAP, CCAP, ECAN, and Mid-Kansas CAP. I know, going with my history, I've previously worked for a nonprofit in the Topeka area for over 20 years. And during that time, I was familiar with a few of these, but I did not understand that the entire state was covered by a community action program. So I want to make sure you're aware of this, help spread the word. Sometimes in our rural areas, people may think there are no services for their county, but may very well be one of these community action agencies could be providing services or have services available. They might just have limited resources for people to be aware that they are here. All right, touching on partnering with a community action agency or other organization. For CSBG, because linkages, coordination of services to prevent duplication is highly important. You'll notice if you've looked at the grant application, there is a question about, did you reach out to the community action agency for that service area that you're planning to propose the work for? And we hope that you've communicated to them, talked with them, tried to develop a partnership so that there's no duplication, or if there's something you may be able to partner on for whatever that project might be. And now in some cases, it may be not duplicated at all. But it's important to have that connection so that we can all work together to make a difference for families of low income. Right. So how do we use the discretionary funds? Every state gets their allocation of funds. And if they have a law or a policy and procedure manual, things may be very different from state to state. So here in Kansas, out of these items, we choose to provide discretionary grant funds towards the training and technical assistance and innovative projects. It's important to know that 90% of our allocation goes directly to the community action agencies, right? But there's always more to be done. Keeping in mind these agencies do provide a variety of services to a lot of service area. And if you're a nonprofit, you know those dollars are always very competitive. Everyone's always fighting for every dollar. So it's important, again, collaboration to use our dollars more effectively. Right, I'm going to turn it over to Monique. She's going to go over some of the next slides.
Thank you, Marilyn. As she was saying in the last slide, the discretionary grant can be used for innovative projects. So we're just going to take a moment and kind of talk about what those programs or projects are. As it relates to your agency, it could be a new project. Perhaps you've seen a need and you haven't served it before. You can be used for that. It could be used for a modification of an existing project. Maybe you have a project, and through the process of evaluating the services that you are providing, you came up with a project or a thought or an idea of how that particular program could be more effective and efficient. Maybe you have seen or did a study and there's a unmet need in your community that this project could supply. And then again, like Marilyn has touched on, a collaboration with another agency or organization that can help address the poverty in your communities. Now, when we talk about innovation as a form of change, it can be these various aspects that's listed on this slide. It can be product and service innovations, process innovations, organizational innovations, and marketing innovations. Next slide, please. So when we talk about explaining how a project is innovative, we also want to consider why the project is innovative. And some of those solutions could be perhaps the innovation saves time, or it's cost effective and more efficient. We talked about that on the previous slide. Maybe it increases the reach of a program that you're already providing a service and potential more beneficiaries. Perhaps it reaches new beneficiaries that would not have been reached otherwise with this project. And then again, it could be more of a holistic, community-led, sustainable solution, and that's what the people in your community, in the low income community, are they more stable? Could they have more healthier or live healthier or benefit from this program? And then two, does it increase your outcomes? What is your outcomes? Who are we trying to reach? What are we trying to do? And if those outcomes are met. And then lastly, targets are a completely new area. This happens very rarely, but it can happen. Also, we can go to the next one. We talked about innovative, but we also this grant can be used for training and technical assistance. You see on this slide that there are 8 possible training and technical assistance projects that you could be engaged in. I'm not going to go through each one, but I am going to touch on a couple of them. Identifying and sharing best practices. Maybe your organization could receive some training and technical assistance on innovative projects and using CSBG resources, and then leveraging those with other public and private sources to become more effective in your communities. What about serving undeserved areas? You can get training and use training and technical assistance to look at ways in which strategies you can use in rural areas and communities with limited resources. Relationship building and partnering. We said that again, linkages, collaborations with the state CSBG offices and other state agencies and programs. Our desire is to make a larger impact using these partnerships and collaborations across the state so that we can serve as many Kansas as possible. And that the last one I want to touch on is leadership development, succession planning, mentoring, and then also in those communities, what kind of leadership academies can you provide so that families and households are more stable and economically successful in those communities as well? Next slide. For community action agencies, a lot of times the training and technical assistance can aid them in delivering higher quality services to achieve better outcomes for families in low income. So for a community action agency, it could be for them to increase their analytical infrastructure. And those needs might be IT systems, developing software so they can track their clients and their customers, analytics, developing and using data for continuous improvement, making sure that those measurable outcomes and inputs are tracked well. And then your data management. You know, when we do a program, we want to make sure that we are capturing all the data. Who are we serving? Where are we serving? And what are those resources and those things? And are we indeed making an impact where we desire to? Next slide. Marilyn, I think this one is yours.
Very good. Thank you, Moniz. So allowability and limitations. This is very key to this program. Again, I've already touched on the below 125% of the current federal poverty limit. And we've got some examples there. For example, a household of 4 cannot earn more than $37,500. So, and 1 no more than $18,225. So keeping in mind the income limit is lower, so you'd want to make sure that you could document this. I'm going to share a little example. Years ago at a previous job, we had applied for the CSBG grant one year and was awarded it. Our intention was to serve households below this income limit, and we had the client self-report that their income was that, and only billed to this grant if they were below that income limit. However, we did not get documentation of like pay stubs or a self-certification sign that they earn this much money and below. And so therefore, for that particular service that we applied to at our nonprofit, this was not a good match because it didn't work well with the service we were providing. So just a little simple story. Someone who worked here at KHRC came and monitored our organization, was able to work with us through that. We got through the grant, but decided this was not the best match for what we were trying to do. So always keeping that it's related to those in poverty, to help lift people out of poverty. So very important. And also, you see there cannot use CSBG funds in any way that identifies with anything partisan and nonpartisan, any kind of political activities, voter registration, or transportation to the polls. This is a federal funding source. So also, we must spend down the funds. In the request for proposal, or RFP, you'll find the time frame. In past cycles of discretionary funding, sometimes people don't recognize, or applicants don't recognize, that dollars that are, if awarded, must be fully spent and exhausted before the time frame. Currently, we do work off of a federal fiscal year. However, we have allowed this grant to only go through the end of August. So not this August, but the next August. So, you'd have to make sure whatever project you applied for, those funds would be taken care of and paid out completely by the end of the grant period. So that affects your timeline of the project. Very important for CSBG funds, we cannot purchase or improve land. We can't construct anything or permanently improve a building or other facility. One story, for example, out of the 8 community action agencies, of course, they have this regular CSBG dollars that they receive, but they needed to have a new parking lot so that people were safe and able to park within their building that they'd been there for 50 years, right? And they needed a new parking lot, but CSBG could not help with that. They had to seek other funding sources because it would be a permanent improvement. Now, we can ask for a waiver, but just like anything else, if you're going to ask for a waiver, you will have had to exhaust all your other options and have extraordinary circumstances. Do note, though, for weatherization kind of things, like I want to say like the window plastic tapes, those kinds of weatherization kind of winter kits, something like that would be allowable. Okay.
Marilyn, we did have a question on the income limit slide.
Sure.
The question was, has the 200% of the federal poverty level allowability been lifted, or is it still applicable to some funds still?
Very good question. Those of you who follow CSBG may be aware that CSBG during this pandemic time has increased the allowability, fortunately, from 125% of federal poverty limit to 200% federal poverty limit. And now, because this is currently only good through the end of, I think it's September of this year, we have to remain the 125% for our discretionary grantees. So in short, the community action agencies are monitoring this daily. that their services may have to switch on, if it doesn't get floated within the law, then we have to go back down to 125%. The community action agencies do. And that's why we present this discretionary grant at this funding level, so that you don't have to go up and down in the middle of a project. I hope that helps. Okay. Awesome. Thank you, Monice. Very fitting question.
Sure.
All right. Sustainability. So I'll go ahead and go on this one. I know I'm going to pass it back to Monice here in just a moment. We do want these to be, or need these to be, more like one-time opportunities. It's not ongoing support. Keeping in mind training and technical assistance or innovative programs, we want it to be sustaining, and that is a part in our scoring mechanism that Monice will go over. Keeping in mind that history of these grants have been between $4,000 and $52,000 with an average award of 21. And all proposals are reviewed by the grant committee. Now I'm going to pass it back to Monice.
Thanks, Marilyn. Okay, competitive scoring. So I will say at the onset that the scoring is done by a review committee, and the actual score sheet is a part of the application packet. I know that we have the 5 bullets here, the 5 numbers on the screen here, and those are the actual sections in which you will be scored. You will see that each one has a weighted score at the end, how it will be weighted, and is also on your score sheet outlined the way that it is here. I'm going to actually take a little bit of time and kind of go through each one, and then we will talk about some specifics on the next slide. So the entity followed the application instructions. You would think that we wouldn't need to say that, but it is very important. You think that you have all the information there. You think that you've followed all the instructions, but something is missing. To this, I would say, do it, reread it, and then pass it off to someone else to also to review for you, because you want to make sure that you have dotted all your I's and crossed all your T's. Again, look at your proposed project. Does it represent an innovative program, activity, training, or technical assistance for the need that you have documented? So make sure that it is an innovative program addressing a need. The third is the proposed project is directly related to the purposes of the CSBG Act. There is a question in the application that asks you to explain how your particular project is related to the CSBG Act. We know that this is a community services block grant, so we have to make sure that we are in compliance with the language and the services of the grant. Then one important thing is, have you demonstrated, or can you demonstrate that your agency has the capacity to effectively implement, produce and plan the results and meet the reporting requirements? This is also a question on the application. We're going to ask you to identify those key persons that is going to help implement this plan, this project, should you receive funding, and we want to know, would you be able to effectively follow through, plan, implement, and meet the reporting requirements. Also, we're going to ask you, and Marilyn had touched on this, describe how the plan is going to be sustained. This is where the linkages comes in. This is where other community resources come in, because you certainly, if you have seen an unmet need in your community, you want to be able to have that need continually met. So as you are thinking about your project and your plan, you're putting this all together, reach out and look at other agencies or resources that may be available to you in your communities to help sustain this project after the grant period. Next slide, Marilyn. Great, the application. Okay, so you have received, or on our website, you received the request for proposal guide. So that gives you all the instructions and the information in regards to filling out your application. Then we just talked about some of the scoring. and how you will be scored on your application. Please be reminded that the due date is June 30th, 2023. I'm going to say that again, June 30th. So make sure that you have everything in as required on the request for proposal guide. The instructions are there on how to submit your application and the form in which we need it submitted. Cover page / checklist. This is your best friend. The cover page and the checklist, you can go down and check each line of your document, of those things that we've asked. I would certainly ask you again to check and recheck. I know we had received an application in the past where they submitted the application, but we got every other page. So this is, and so we don't want those type of things to happen that would cause you to get a less than desirable score on your application. So please take the time to check that checklist. It's the very first page of the application, and make sure that all your documentation is there, it's in the right form, and everything is ready to go. The application itself is in Microsoft Word, so it should be user-friendly. Brief, less is more. In the application, there are those places that are designated for narrative, and then there are places where it's asking for specific information. Please use them as instructed. When we are talking about how does it relate to the CSBG Act, give us specifics how this can be done. There's always going to be a place for a narrative for you to give us the feel and the of the project, but be brief, concise, answer the questions that is asked. As Marilyn has stated, the grant period and timeline is through August 31st, 2024. So be guided by that. Your logic model, this is really important. This is probably, I think it's item 3 in the application. So what is your needs statement? What activities or interventions are you going to do? How are you going to measure this? What are you going to use to measure this? What tools? What are going to be your data sources? How are you going to collect that information? And then how are you going to evaluate? And then at the end, what is going to be your desired or intended outcomes for this particular project? We want you to be as specific as possible when it comes to these things I was talking about. Less is more. Here's one example that less is more. Answer, we can use those the data and those measurable outcomes and things for your project, but make sure that you think about how you're going to track and document your program. Let's see, budget. I think that comes as an attachment to the application. It is in Microsoft Excel. The budget portion itself, I think, is 2 or 3 pages, and it has a list of line items, and you just put your budget items in there. It's kind of a high level type of categories that you will see on that budget, but there's also a place on the application for you to give us a budget narrative. And so if you wanted to talk about what certain items of that budget is going to be used for, it would be in the narrative section of the budget portion of your application, as the budget itself, the Excel form, does not allow place for you to put narrative. And then, of course, we want to make sure that all your certifications and assurances and attachments are attached. Again, that's one of those, and they're signed by the appropriate person, officer, board member, however your organization instructions, that they have signed the appropriate documents, and that is part of your packet. And then lastly, but certainly not at least, all awards will be announced by August 15th, 2023. All right, okay, and then on this one, you can see if you have any questions at all in regard to what we've talked about today. If we don't get your question, if you don't have a question now, but you have one in the future, here are the ways that you can reach out to us and ask those questions, and we will try to be as expedient as possible to get those responses back to you. Marilyn, I think I do see some other questions here. If you want to come on camera as well, we can probably do these together.
Sounds great. So,
do you see them? Let's see.
yeah.
Okay. I think one of them is still about the income limit. How do you determine if a community is below 100% of the current federal poverty level?
A community specifically. Well, it's going to probably, and certainly Monish, you can jump in here, thinking about this. You might not focus on the community as the need, but more as the families in that community that are below 125% of federal poverty limit. What are their needs? There could be some, I guess, neighborhoods or counties that might very well have documented demographics that they're a high number of that income level, but that might be tricky. You want to maybe turn it around to focus in on what the needs are to determine that project. So, anything to add there?
No, I think you're right. Sometimes you may zip codes or sometimes are a good way identifier of persons in a low income community.
Very good question. All right, let's see what else. Oh, PowerPoint available. Yes, we will email the PowerPoint to you upon the conclusion of this. We've also got it recorded. So let's say you're the executive director of a nonprofit and you want your grant writer to see it. If you're lucky enough to have a grant writer, you could certainly have that. And same, let's say if you're a program manager and you want to, if you want someone else to write this grant for you, that may be useful to have the recording as well. And is that all the questions?
I don't see any more.
This is awesome. And we know that people work very hard to write grant applications. It is a lot of work. We've tried to make ours somewhat simple, just with the questions that we have to know about. Certainly, if you've ever got any feedback about anything in the application, we're open to that. If there's something that could be done better. Looks like we had one more question. If we have two CAP agencies that have a technical assistance need for an upgraded housing software for assisting HCV and TBRA households, do they apply together? That is a very good question, Robert. Thank you. I would say that if you're going to do that, that's wonderful because it's a partnership, but you'd want to choose a lead organization. Yeah, we had something like that similar in one of the recent rounds where multiple Habitat for Humanities were getting a certain software for the lower income level to do rehab work. And so one Habitat was the lead on that. Letters of support are always nice, right? Let's say you're a non-community action agency and you're applying, a letter of support from your local, whatever service area it is, community action agency. That's nice, not required, but nice. Let's see. Is there a particular amount that is going to each of the regional community action agencies? From the discretionary funds, no. It's completely competitive for the community action agencies and the nonprofits overall.
It's a good question.
It is. Oh, and Vanessa, I have to tell you, one of the examples we wanted to share, felt so bad. One of the nonprofits went to all the trouble of doing the application last round, and they somehow they scanned only one side of the paper.
Yeah.
So we
mentioned that, yes.
Yep.
All that work.
So it was just only half the application. So unfortunately, that one didn't score as high as they could have, maybe. So okay.
And those type of things, are easy to do because you are you are so focused on the project and making sure that you have everything in there that you need, that little things like that can kind of trip you up. And that's why I say check, recheck, then pass it off to someone else, because those on the call here, I know that when you're writing a grant, when you're writing and reading, your brain knows what you're trying to say. And so it's easy to overlook something that may just jump out at someone else. And we want everyone to do their best and make it hard on the review committee. That's make it hard. So that's why we encourage, please double check and answer all the questions.
It's very good. And of course, with CSBG overall, trying to, eliminate poverty, we do it all together. It takes all of us working together collaboratively with new ideas, targets. Sometimes it's the past services, but for this program, for this grant funding source, our discretionary dollars, hopefully it's something innovative and something to help advance the overall idea of what CSBG is.
We have another question. And if we are a nonprofit group, does a letter of support need to come from the Regional Community Action Agency and our application?
That would be a good idea. Yeah. So you'd want it. Let's say you're working in Sedgwick County, so you'd want to maybe see if you could get a letter of support from WISCAP. Maybe you're working in Wyandotte County. Maybe you'd want to get a letter of support from the Economic Opportunity Foundation or EOF. The letter of support is not required, but it does show that you're collaborating.
So there wasn't, yes, so she said it says advisable then.
Yes.
Yes, yes,
Mhm.
yes.
Mm-hmm.
And the same way too, we encourage our community action agencies to also reach out to other organizations as well to help with their work as well. So we want it to be really both ways. We really want to strengthen it, our reach, broaden our reach, and strengthen the work that we can do together. So
not just
yes.
to cause busy work, to actually help the linkage, right?
Right, right.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, this has been great. We will, as soon as the recording's finished and we get that updated, we'll send all the information out to all of you that registered. I want to thank you for joining us. All
Thanks.
right. Have a wonderful day. All right.
Goodbye.
Bye-bye.